Well, a good morning. I thought I had the book upside down there. That's really not a very good thing, is it? The last day. This clearly won't be the last read because currently there's over 100 pages left to go. Probably going to have to split it into 2, maybe 3. We'll see how my voice holds up. It's not looking good already. Here we go. Chapter 15. The Torture Room. The moon was out and the stars were twinkling, and it really was a beautiful night for pain. Serpine descended into the castle's cold, dank depths and strode through the stone corridors. Already he was beginning to smile. He came to the heavy wooden door and paused with his hand over the latch, savouring the deliciousness of the moment. The latch lifted and Serpine stepped in. "Here we go again," he said. Skulduggery Pleasant raised his head, practically the only part of his body he could move. Serpine had placed a binding spell on the shackles that secured him to the chair, and so, unable to use magic, the detective could only watch as Serpine closed the door behind him. Life is a cycle, is it not, Skulduggery? We are all destined to repeat ourselves over and over. You at my mercy, me merciless. "You're talking," the detective said. "I thought you'd have grown out of the whole villainy thing by now, Nefarian." Serpine smiled as he sat in the wooden chair opposite. The room was small, with stone walls and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Being a respectable citizen wasn't for me, but then you knew that, didn't you? You warned them about me, but they didn't listen. That must have been annoying, for the elders not even to respect you enough to take you seriously." "I think it's because I'm always smiling." "Perhaps you're right. Oh, Skulduggery, what am I going to do with you?" "Untie me?" Serpine laughed. "Maybe later. We always seem to be at each other's throats, don't we? Can I ask you a question? Let's pretend just for a moment that we live in the world where things are crazy and the faceless ones are real. When you call them, what you hope to gain? Pat on the head? How my lords and masters will reward me for my servitude is up to them. I would never presume to guess." "That door closed, Nefarian. Just us 2 guys in here, chatting. What in it for ye?" Serpine leaned in. "I get to be by their side when they raise this world, when they expunge the stain of humanity, and when it's over, I get to bask in their terrible glory." Skulduggery nodded. "Yeah, I hadn't a clue what you just said." Serpine laughed. "You're going to fall," Skulduggery continued. "Really?" "You're going to fall hard, and I'm going to be there. I'll be the one pushing you." Big talk from the man tied to the chair. Or are you even a man? A thing, perhaps. An oddity. "They'll come for you." "Who will?" "The elders, Meritorious and his lot, please. They're too busy worrying about being rude to me." "Not after this. They'll probably be at your doorstep as we speak." Serpine stood, walked behind his captive. "Somehow, I don't think they would be able to marshal their forces so quickly, or so efficiently. No, my old enemy, I think for the moment, anyway, we're all quite very much alone, and you have something I want." "A winning sense of style?" "The key," Serpine said as he walked back into the detective's line of sight. "I don't know what you're talking about." Serpine was moving his left hand slightly, like he was conducting music. "Obviously, you're not just going to offer this information up, so I think a spot of torture is required." "Ah," said the detective, "old times. I remember those dark autumn days like that I'd while away cutting you, making you cry out. Fun for all, family." "You may think my options would be limited as far as torture is concerned, especially now that you don't have skin and all to cut, but I've picked up a few new tricks that I think you might quite enjoy." Serpine moved his fingers in a wave motion, directing it at the chair he had just been sitting on. The wood creaked and groaned as if it expanded and contracted like it was breathing. The detective couldn't avoid looking at it. "If I can do that to a chair," Serpine said, enjoying the moment, "think what I can do to bone." There was a loud crack as the chair splintered. Serpine hunkered down in front of him. "Well, Skulduggery, where is that tiled old defiance, the taunting, the goading? Where are the endless heroic clichés? Aren't you going to look me in the eye and tell me to do my worst?" "Actually, I was going to ask if you'd go easy on me. I'm feeling kind of tender today." Serpine stood, opened his left hand in front of the detective. This is your one chance. Tell me where the key is. Okay. Serpine raised an eyebrow. Really? No, only joking. Do your worst. Serpine laughed and his fingers started moving and the detective started screaming. Chapter 16. What's in a name? Stephanie soaked her elbow in the sink. She had broken off a piece of the rock Tanith Lowe had given her and dissolved it in the water, filling the sink with bubbles and the library's restroom with a pungent smell. Whatever the rock was, it was doing its job. The bruises on her arms were fading. She dried herself with a spotless white towel, let the water gurgle into the drain, and allowed herself to sag against the wall. Her body may have been tired, but her mind was alert and racing, surging with anger. She was furious at herself for being unable to disobey China's instruction. How could China have done that to her, to Skulduggery, after he'd trusted her? No, she reminded herself, he hadn't trusted her. That had been Stephanie's mistake, not his, and because she went to China before the elders or even Ghastly, now it could be too late to do anything. That was her fault. What had Tanith Lowe called Stephanie? A warrior? That was laughable. No matter what Tanith had thought she had seen in her, she was wrong. There was nothing warrior-like about her. She'd run straight into trouble without thinking, without one moment of hesitation, not because she was brave or heroic, but because she was stupid. Because she didn't want to be left out, because she didn't want to wait. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a tactic. All she had was a penchant for raising Cain. It came to her then. Her eyes widened, and she stood up straight, a new strength coursing through her limbs. And just like that, China's command over her was broken. She needed Ghastly. She didn't really know where he lived, so she needed his address, and there was only one way she could think to get that. She left the restroom, passing the window, realising that it was morning already. She crossed the hall to China's apartment and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. China wasn't in. Stephanie looked at the door. Nothing special about it. She hadn't noticed anything unusual about it on the other side either. No chains, bolts or extra locks. There could be a locking spell placed on it, and if there was, then she'd be wasting her time. But she didn't think there was. Skulduggery had said a locking spell needed to be dismantled every time a door was opened, then cast again. She doubted China would have the patience to do that on a daily basis. Stephanie took a step back. An ordinary door. An ordinary, flimsy door. It was possible. She knew it was possible. She was tall and strong. This door was all that stood between her and saving Skulduggery. She had strong legs. Her legs were muscled, a swimmer's legs. They were strong. The door was weak. She could do it. She had to do it. She had to save her friend. Her boots slammed against the door. She kicked again, and again, and again. Her legs were strong. She couldn't fail. Desperation lent her strength. The door was weak, and it burst open. She hurried in, moving right for where she had seen the address book. It wasn't there. It wasn't on the small table. Where was it? She looked around. China had moved it. Where? Why? Had she known Stephanie would be looking for it? No, there was no way she could have predicted that. Then she had moved it for some other reason, some other ordinary, average reason. She'd put it away. She had put it back. Yes, she'd put it back in its usual place. Where would China keep an address book? Stephanie went to the desk, opening the drawers and rifling through them. Papers, letters, no address book. She turned eyes, scouring the room, aware that China would walk through that broken door at any time. She went to the shelves. No address book. Where? She moved into the bedroom. There on the bedside table, the address book. She snatched it up, finding the B's. Her finger moved down the page, bespoke tailors. She memorised the address, dropped the book on the bed and turned to go. Hello, dear, China said. She walked in and Stephanie stepped back, wary. I saw your handiwork outside, China said. What did my poor door ever do to you? Did you break anything else while you were here? A vase? A teacup, perhaps? Just the door. Oh, well, I suppose I should be thankful for small mercies. Did you find what you were looking for, child? Stephanie tightened her fist. Don't call me that. China laughed. That look in your eye is almost scary. Have you done anything to help Skulduggery, or are you still too busy helping yourself? Excuse me. He inspires loyalty in you, doesn't he? China said, an eyebrow raised. You can't be around oust Mr. Pleasant without liking him, without wanting to fight alongside him. You should have been there during the war, you know. You should have seen him then. I just can't understand how you betray him like this. For the first time since she'd known her, Ina's eyes turned cold. I haven't betrayed him, child. I may have failed him, but I haven't betrayed him. To betray is an act against. I just haven't acted at all. Whatever. Not interested in semantics? China asked, her smile returning. But of course not. You're a straightforward kind of girl, aren't you? I'm leaving now, Stephanie said as she headed for the door. Straightforward, China continued, but not too bright. Stephanie, would you be a dear and stop? Stephanie stopped. I admire your courage, child. I really do. But rallying a cavalry to go after Skulduggery is just too risky. Too much could go wrong. Now sit in the corner there like a good little girl. Stephanie nodded and walked for the door. Stop, China ordered. I said the corner. Stephanie reached the door and looked back. China was frowning. I don't understand. How are you able to do this, Stephanie? Answer me. I'm not Stephanie, Stephanie answered. And if you want to keep me here, then you'd better be ready to kill me. China's frown disappeared. I don't want to kill you, my dear, she said, and the hint of a smile appeared. So now you've finally chosen a name. Yeah, and I'm leaving. Right now. Maybe you stand some chance after all. Before you go, will you do me the honour of introducing yourself? Of course, Stephanie said right before she walked out of the apartment. My name is Valkyrie Kane. Ghastly opened the door, saw Stephanie and nodded. I'm sorry if I upset you yesterday, he said. I realise I have no right to tell you what you can and cannot do, but please believe that I was acting in your best. They have Skulduggery, Stephanie said, interrupting. What? Serpine has him. Last night he came in with his paper men and they attacked him and took him away with them. We need to get to the elders. Ghastly tried a smile to see if she'd return it, to see if she'd admit her joke. Stephanie didn't smile back. You don't know if I should be involved in any of this, she said. That's fine, that's your opinion, and that's fine, but let's forget about opinion. Let's look at facts. Serpine has Skulduggery. He's broken the truce. He believes the sceptre is real, and he's proved that he's willing to kill him to get it. He has to be stopped, and I need your help to stop him. You saw this? You actually saw Serpine take him? I was there. He looked at her and nodded. Then I suppose it's a very good thing you decided to stick around. Ghastly brought his car around and Stephanie told him exactly what had happened as they sped through the streets to the sanctuary. The windows were heavily tinted, but even so he had a scarf wrapped round his face and a hat pulled low over his eyes. The Waxworks Museum hadn't opened yet, so they let themselves in the back and hurried through the darkness. Ghastly searched the darkened wall for the switch, found it, and the wall parted. Stephanie was the first to reach the bottom of the stairs, and she strode into the sanctuary. The administrator hurried up to her, frowning. I'm sorry, he said. You don't have an appointment. We're here to see Meritorious. The elders cannot be disturbed, the administrator said. I must ask you to leave at once. It's an emergency, Ghastly said as he joined her, but the administrator still shook his head. All requests to visit the elders must go through the proper channels, he said, but Stephanie had heard enough. She barged past him, heading for the door. Suddenly, there was a flash of grey, and a cleaver was before her, holding the blade of his scythe to her throat. Stephanie froze. There was a movement all around her, sound all around her, and the only things in her world were herself and the cleaver. She could hear Ghastly threatening the administrator, threatening the cleavers, and the administrator protesting and insisting they leave. Ghastly's voice was rising, becoming angry, telling the cleaver to lower the weapon, but the cleaver was still and silent, a statue. Stephanie could see her burnished reflection in his visor. She didn't dare move. Before the situation could spiral out of control, before Stephanie's head could become separated from her body, the administrator gave in and agreed to ask Meritorious if he would receive visitors. At a nod, the cleaver stepped back and swung the scythe down by his side, and behind him, making the mere sheathing of the weapon into an art form. Stephanie backed off, moving slowly by the cleaver, and the cleaver had gone back to his post like nothing had happened. They stayed in the foyer while the administrator hurried off, and presently they heard footsteps approaching. Ekin Meritorious appeared, and looked mildly surprised when he laid eyes on Ghastly. Mr. Bespoke, he said, coming forward. Will wonders never cease? Grand Mage, Ghastly said as they shook hands. You've already met Valkyrie Kane, I think. Oh, you chose a name after all, Meritorious said with a slightly disapproving look. I hope Mr. Pleasant knows what he's doing. Skulduggery's been captured, Stephanie blurted out. Serpine has him. Oh, not this again? It's true, Ghastly said. Meritorious peered at him. You saw it yourself? Well, Ghastly hesitated. No, but Meritorious waved his hands. Skulduggery Pleasant is an excellent detective and we value his help and his expertise on many difficult cases. But when it comes to Nefarian Serpine, he does not have his usual detached perspective. Serpine has captured him. My dear, I like you, and I can see why Skulduggery likes you. You are a frighteningly upfront person, and this is a quality to be admired. However, you are new to our culture and our ways, and you have heard a decidedly skewed version of our history. Serpine is not the villain he once was. I were there, Stephanie said, struggling to remain calm. Serpine came with his paper creatures, and they took him. This made Meritorious stop. Paper creatures? Well, it looked like they were made of paper. He nodded slowly. Hollow men. Minions of Serpine. Terrible things, bloated by stink and evil. Now do you believe me? We need to get him back. Grand Mage, Ghastly said, my friend is in danger. I know you don't want it to be true, but the truce has been broken. Serpine and his sorcerers, allied with him, will waste no time in seizing powers. The elders must act now. On what authority? Meritorious boomed. On the word of a girl I barely know. I'm not lying, said Stephanie. You may, though, be mistaken. I'm not. Serpine wants the sceptre and he thinks Skulduggery can get it from him. The sceptre is a fairy tale. The sceptre's real, Stephanie said, cutting him off. It's real enough that Serpine is after it, and he killed the 2 men you had spying on him so that you wouldn't find out about it until it was too late. Meritorious hesitated for a moment. Miss Kane, if you're wrong and we move against Serpine now, we are starting a war we are not ready for. I'm sorry, Stephanie said, seeing the trepidation in the elder's eyes and speaking softly now, but the war has already started. The paperclip lay on the table and didn't move. Stephanie focused, flexed her fingertips, and then thrust her palm towards it, trying to genuinely believe that thin air was nothing more than interlocking objects. The paperclip still didn't move. She nudged it, just to make sure it wasn't stuck on anything. Ghastly entered the room. We're ready to go, he said. You sure you want to do this? Very sure. She put the paperclip in her pocket and nodded to the door behind him. Is there an army out there? Not quite. How many? 2. 2? He has an army of cleavers and he gives us 2. Sending any more would arouse suspicion, Ghastly said. Meritorious needs a little more time to contact Morena Crow and Sagacious Tome and convince them that action is necessary, and until he does, this rescue mission is strictly unofficial. Please tell me they're as good as Skulduggery said they are. Both their uniforms and their sides can ward off the majority of magical attacks, and there aren't many deadlier in close combat. Close combat? Stephanie said. What about throwing fireballs and stuff? Are they elementals or adepts? Ghastly cleared his throat. Neither, actually. Magic corrupts certain people, and cleavers need to be seen as completely impartial. So they're not magic at all, then? They have some magic, but it's just adds to their combat abilities. They're quite strong and really very fast. So what are they going to do? Run around Serpine until he gets dizzy and falls over? If it all goes according to plan, Serpine won't even know we're there. And what are the chances of that happening? Excuse me. Ghastly looked at her, and for a moment he held his ground. Then he looked away. They're not great, he admitted. Exactly. They looked up again, but Mr. Bliss has offered us their help. He's coming, Stephanie asked nervously. She didn't like the idea of going anywhere with Mr. Bliss. No, not him, Ghastly said, but he's sending someone. 5 is a good number. We can sneak in, grab Skulduggery, sneak out. Simple. The door opened behind them and Meritorious appeared. I've arranged your transport, he said. They followed him up out of the sanctuary and exited the waxworks from the back where a large van was parked. As soon as Meritorious emerged into the sunlight, 2 cleavers walked forward. They took their scythes from their sheaths before they climbed in. Stephanie hoped their van didn't go over potholes or she'd be skewered before they even reached Serpine's castle. Another person walked forward, a person she recognised from the library. Tanith Lowe, Meritorious said. This is Ghastly Bespoke and Valkyrie Kane. We've met. Tanith said, giving Stephanie a polite nod. She carried a sword in a black scabbard, its lacquered surface crisscrossed with Nixon marks. Mr. Bliss sent you? Ghastly asked. He did. He thought I could be of use. That's quite a recommendation. He just wants this business to be over with as soon as possible, Tanith said. I'm at your disposal for the rest of the endeavour. Then let's go. Tanith climbed into the van and Ghastly got behind the wheel. Good luck, Notorious said as Stephanie was about to join them. Thank you. He shrugged. You're going to need it. A fabulous rescue indeed. The rescue team stood by the side of the road and looked up at the wall surrounding Serpine's land. It was maybe 3 times as tall as Stephanie. Beyond it lay woodland, and beyond that, the castle. It occurred to Stephanie that if they didn't get Skulduggery back, it was all over. Serpine would get the sceptre, and the Faceless Ones would return. The fate of the entire planet rested on the shoulders of a skeleton, and the 5 people sent to rescue him. What if we do go up against Serpine? Stephanie asked, fighting to keep the dread out of her voice. She had to remain strong. She couldn't let them see that she was just an ordinary 12-year-old. What if we can't just get in and get out without anyone noticing? Do we have a plan if we have to face him? Ah, Ghastly said, considering it. Not really. I'm going to try and cut him with my sword, Tanith said. Right, Stephanie said. Excellent. What about guards? Do you think they'll be expecting us? Serpine is used to taking the elders taking forever to make their calm, thought-out decisions, Tanith said, so he won't be expecting anything as amazingly rash and reckless as this. Ghastly nodded. That'll teach him to underestimate stupid people. Oh, all right then, Stephanie said. Just wanted to make sure we'd thought of everything. Let's go. Without a word, the cleavers ran forward and jumped, legs tucked beneath them, and cleared the top of the wall and disappeared from view. Show-offs, Ghastly muttered, sweeping both hands down by his sides. A gust of wind lifted him and swung him up towards the wall. He grabbed on and pulled himself to the top. Tanith turned to Stephanie. Want a boost? If you wouldn't mind, please. Tanith crouched, interlocked her fingers, and Stephanie put one foot in her hands. On the count of 3, Stephanie shot upwards. Tanith was strong, stronger than she looked, because Stephanie had no trouble catching the top of the wall. Ghastly helped her up, then dropped down the other side and turned to wait for her. She let herself hang down, then released her grip, and her boots crunched onto the dried leaves and brittle twigs. A moment later, Tanith landed beside her. The woodland was thick, and as they moved deep into it, it became darker. The evening sun had difficulty filtering through the tall trees, and it was cold enough to make Stephanie grateful for her coat. The cleavers didn't make a sound as they walked. The woodland was quiet, quieter than it had any right to be. No birds sang, nothing rustled in the undergrowth. It was eerie. They reached the tree line at the rear of the castle and ducked down. A small army of hollow men patrolled the grounds. Oh, joy, Ghastly said grimly. How are we supposed to get by them? What we need is a diversion, Tanith said. Suggestions? Tanith didn't answer, but after a moment she looked at the cleavers. Ghastly understood immediately. There are too many, he protested. Tanith's tone was flat but firm. We don't have a choice. The cleavers tilted their heads towards her, and after a moment they nodded. They stole back amongst the trees and were gone. Stephanie waited with Tanith and Ghastly. They won't be able to hold them off for long, Ghastly said. Long enough for us to sneak in, though, Tanith replied. That's not what I meant. They've just sent them to their deaths. She didn't look at him. They'll do their jobs. We'll do ours. Do you want your friend back or not? Ghastly didn't answer. Look, Stephanie said. The hollow men were moving fast, moving out of their field of vision. Let's go, Tanith said. They broke from their trees, sprinting across the wide open space towards the castle. Stephanie glanced to her right as she ran, saw the cleavers standing back to back in the distance as the hollow men closed in. They reached the castle. Tanith placed her hand flat on the lock and twisted her wrist. Stephanie heard the lock break within the door, and Tanith pushed it open. They crept in, closing the door behind them. They kept to the outer corridor, staying away from the cold heart of the castle, found a stairway leading down, and Tanith went first, sword in her right hand, scabbard in her left. Stephanie followed a few paces behind, and Ghastly came last. They reached the basement, although Stephanie thought that the dungeon would probably be more accurate. Tanith held up her hand, and they stopped and watched a hollow man clump ahead of them and pass out of sight. They made their way forward. Tanith approached the first heavy iron door and put her ear against it. After a moment she pushed it open. The hinges groaned in protest, but the room was empty. Ghastly went to the next door, listened, and opened it. Again empty. Tanith glanced at Ghastly, and they shared a look, and Stephanie knew what it was about. We should split up, Stephanie whispered. No, No way. If we waste time, the hollow men will be back outside the door and we won't be able to get away. Then you come with me, Ghastly whispered. Stephanie shook her head. I'll be fine. I'll listen at the doors. If I hear anything, I'll get you. If I meet a bad guy, you can be pretty sure you'll know about it. We don't have a choice. They looked at her but didn't argue. Tanith went to the next door. Ghastly hurried down the length of the corridor, and Stephanie turned back and rounded the corridor. She came to another row of iron doors and listened intently at each one. She followed the maze of corridors wherever they took her. She found herself breathing through her mouth and tasted the foulness of the air on the back of her throat. There were puddles here, stagnant pools of water on the uneven stone floor. The doors were no longer made of iron, but of rotting wood. The flickering of the torches in the brackets made shadows dance on the walls. She saw someone moving ahead and was about to duck back when she recognised Ghastly. He waved to her and she waved back and started checking the doors closest to her. They were working their way towards each other when Stephanie came to a door and heard a low whistling. She frowned. Could Skulduggery whistle? He could talk without lips, so she couldn't see a reason why he wouldn't be able to whistle. She didn't recognise the tune, however. She motioned to Ghastly and he crept forward. After listening for a moment, he nodded. That's the girl from Ipanema, he whispered. That's him. He held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1, and they burst into the room. Skulduggery looked up and stopped whistling. Oh, hello, he said. I know where the key to the caves is. Stephanie closed the door as Ghastly hurried around behind him and stooping to examine the shackles. Quality workmanship, he said. I thought you'd appreciate it. There's a binding spell woven into metal. Nice, it'll take me a moment. I'm not going anywhere. Are you okay? Stephanie asked. I've been treated well, he answered with a nod. Apart from all the torture, it's given me time to think, actually. I know where the key is. So you said. Ghastly stood and the shackles fell. Skulduggery got to his feet. Is Meritorious here? He's telling the others what's going on, Ghastly said. Ah, Skulduggery said. So you're doing this on your own? Tanith Lois here, but basically yes. Skulduggery shrugged. I must admit, it's going rather fabulously so far. The key, Stephanie said. You didn't tell Serpine where it is, did you? I couldn't have, even if I'd wanted to. Just worked it out a few minutes ago. Simply, really, it was right in front of us. We can talk about this later, Ghastly said. We have to go. Will there be farting? I hope not. I'm in the mood for some farting. If there is, Stephanie said, handing him his gun, here's something you can have. Ah, bless, I missed her. Do you have any bullets? No. Skulduggery paused. Excellent, he said, and took the gun away. Let's go, Ghastly said, and stepped out of the door. Stephanie and Skulduggery followed. They hurried down the corridor and turned a corner. A group of hollow men froze in mid-step and regarded them vacantly. Time stood still. Yeah, Skulduggery said. This is a fabulous rescue indeed. The hollow men came at them, and Skulduggery and Ghastly went into action. Skulduggery worked with elbows and knees, wrist locks and arm locks. Ghastly wove in and around attacks, firing out punches at whoever got close. Beyond the hollow men, Stephanie saw Tanith sprinting forward, and then she ran up the wall and across the ceiling and continued running. Upside down, Stephanie stared. She hadn't known Tanith could do that. From the ceiling, Tanith joined the attack, swinging the sword and slicing through the tops of heads. Within a matter of moments, the hollow men were reduced to tatters and a foul smell. Tanith jumped down, flipping to landing on her feet. There are more coming, she said, then added helpfully, we should probably leave. They reached the stairs without encountering any more opposition, but as they were running for the exit, 2 massive doors were kicked open ahead, and the hollow men reinforcements arrived. Skulduggery and Ghastly stepped up, clicking their fingers and hurling fireballs at the ground. Stephanie watched their hands move, manipulating the flames until there was a wall of fire keeping the hollow men back. Tanith turned to Stephanie. Coat! What? Without giving an explanation, Tanith gripped Stephanie's collar and pulled the coat off. She then ran for the window, covering her head with the coat, and jumped. She crashed through in an explosion of glass. Oh! Stephanie murmured. She ran over, climbing through the window as Tanith got to her feet. Thanks, Tanith said, handing her back a coat. Watch out! Ghastly shouted. Stephanie dodged to one side as Ghastly and Skulduggery dived through the window. Ghastly lowered down, Skulduggery above him, like 2 lunatic acrobats. They hit the grass and rolled, coming up at the same time. Flee! Skulduggery said. As they ran for the trees, Stephanie saw one of the cleavers who had accompanied them. Judging by the tattered paper strewn around him, the cleavers had obviously put up an amazing fight, but the sheer number of hollow men had proven too much. He lay dead on the grass. She saw no sign of the other one. And then they were in the trees and not slowing down, and hollow men were crashing through the undergrowth. After them, Ghastly reached the wall first, swept his hands beneath him and let the air lift him over the wall. Tanith just kept running. Right before she was about to smack straight into it, she gave a little jump, and then she was running up the wall. Before Stephanie could ask Skulduggery for a boost, his arm wrapped around her waist and she found herself rushing upwards, the wind in her ears and the top of the wall passing beneath her feet. They landed on the other side with such ease and gentleness that Stephanie almost laughed despite herself. They got in the van and Ghastly turned the key and pulled out onto the road, and they left the castle behind them.